Hi, I'm Larry Richardson and welcome to Sea Level Rise Real Estate, Episode 5. Now this episode is going to focus on real estate agents and what they need to do to stay on top of sea level rise to better inform their buyers and their sellers. Our first episode gave kind of a broad overview of sea level rise and how it's impacting communities and individual property owners. In our second episode, we focused on buyers and the very complicated steps they need to go through to determine, first of all, if a property is actually flooding, and second of all, what should they do? Should they buy or should they move on? Episode 3 focused on sellers, and that mainly had to do with sellers' disclosures. Because in communities that are experiencing sea level rise flooding, and especially properties that are dealing with sea level rise flooding, the sellers need to know on a state-by-state basis what they need to disclose to buyers to avoid costly lawsuits. And our fourth episode was really about owners, and their question was, should I stay or should I go? And again, it is a multi-level chess game of issues they have to deal with. And I provided 7 sea level rise real estate questions as a template that all of those different parties, the buyers, the sellers, and the owners can use to determine what to do next. I also provide in this book a very detailed description of what sea level rise is, why it's speeding up, how it's impacting communities, and the matrix that all of these different parties have to use to make informed decisions when they're involved in real estate decisions. Now, as real estate agents, and I am a real estate agent, I've been licensed for over a dozen years. Currently, I am voluntarily inactive in Florida so I can work on this project, but I do understand what you do. So for real estate agents, I really want to focus on the fact, first of all, that you have to come to grips with the fact that in coastal areas, sea level rise is a problem. Whether it's combined with king tide flooding, whether it's combined with any other issue, the fact is we're up a foot since around the turn of the last century, and it's heading up and up. Some experts are saying that sea level rise will be up 3 feet by the end of this century. Others are saying over 6 feet. That's going to add inches and probably feet to any property that is in an area that's vulnerable to sea level rise flooding. So you have to stay on top of this issue. And the real risk here is not only that if you deny sea level rise or you try to hide it in any way, that if you sell a property that is then impacted by sea level rise, you could get sued. Nobody in this business wants to get sued. Also, really good real estate agents don't want to trick their buyers or their sellers in any way. And in terms of sellers, you need to help them to find out what are the disclosure requirements in that community. And for buyers, you need to figure out what are the disclosure issues or requirements in that community. If you tell a seller, the property's kind of flooding and the street out front, yeah, that gets soaked in the fall when we have king tides, but don't worry about it. And then a buyer buys that property and there was no disclosure. In a lot of states, that can create a problem. So you need to know what is that seller's disclosure requirement. And on the side of buyers, if you're representing the buyer and you have no idea what's going on in your community regarding sea level rise and sea level rise flooding, the same thing. You could end up with a costly lawsuit because you didn't tell them ahead of time either that property flooded or there are other issues in that city or town. And that's one of the other things I want to stress is that even if a property that you're dealing with is not directly impacted by sea level rise flooding, you probably should know what the city is doing to to stop the sea level rise flooding, whether it's raising a seawall, bringing up the water and sewer pipes, or any other issue that will result in higher taxes. You need to know about that because you're probably going to get asked. You also need to know what's going on locally in terms of flood insurance and really with that individual property. How is the flood insurance market responding? Because if someone moves into a house and all of a sudden the flood insurance goes up, I mean, you could either be impacted through a lawsuit, maybe, probably not, but your reputation could be dinged. And you need to stay on top of the mortgage market, because a lot of experts are warning that if sea level rise gets bad enough in a community, there's a chance people won't be able to get flood insurance, which means they won't be able to get mortgages, which could create just an enormous problem. And the final thing you need to be aware of is if you're selling in a community that has a condo association or a homeowners association, you need to know, are they expecting any kind of special assessment coming up to raise their seawall, raise their docks, or otherwise protect their property? Your buyer needs to know that, and the seller needs to know how that may affect the pricing of their property. So I'm just saying, in a holistic sense, real estate agents can't duck the issue of sea level rise flooding anymore. This is in your farm area if you're in a coastal community, on the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, or the Pacific coastal areas. And because it's in your farm area, you have to know it to provide expert advice to your buyers and your sellers. And this will both protect your reputation and just possibly your financial future. So again, please take a look at 7 sea level rise real estate questions. It's the little book that can save a lot of money, and stay on top of this issue with my website, sealevelriserealestate.com. Now, I am going to keep posting videos, and in fact, the next video I am going to post is about the day that climate change and sea level rise denialism died. And you can find out why by watching that video. I'll see you there.